All right, Ascension Radio.
Preparing to
where
live
I
stream.
stuffed that file folder. Where is this playing from? I had found it earlier. Now I'm struggling to find.
I might be I'm going live on YouTube now, so here it goes.
To fly a rocket ship. Right, give me a second. About. I'm going to cut the music here in a moment.
Okay, this didn't.
Let me cancel out of that.
Okay.
Scratch the bumper.
Oh, I saw less than 1 minute ago.
All
And
right,
watching now.
everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hold on.
Well, we're live right now on YouTube, just so you know.
Right.
And
no astronaut launches her space.
yeah. Okay.
I'm going to cut the music.
Okay. Okay, so hi, everybody. Welcome to the GoldFish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. This is our GoldFish Report number 418. And I just wanted to test our audio. Martin, I just want to see if you can test your audio, because this is live, everybody, so we're trying to make sure everything's working.
Hello, everyone.
You're a little low.
A little low?
Oh, now you're good. Okay, very good.
Okay.
Okay, and our engineer at Ascension Radio, we could not hear you once we muted our YouTube, so I just wanted to let you know that. So anyway, I just wanted to welcome everyone. We are live streaming on YouTube tonight. We are simulcasting on Ascension Radio, and I have put the links in the on Facebook and on Twitter for to access Ascension Radio, and we're also going to include it in the description section of the video once it's recorded. But we are very pleased to partner with Ascension Radio tonight. Well, for who knows how long we're going to partner with them, and we are very happy to help them launch their new Ascension Radio to the stars, folks, to the stars, where only the sky is the limit. And that's really what we're aiming for here at the GoldFish Report and Ascension Radio. Tonight, we have joining us our systems researcher who's returning. We had featured Martin a couple weeks ago, and he really generated a lot of interest from people. And we have Martin back to talk with us tonight about our independence. And what does it mean to everybody? You know, right now, our Constitution is under threat, and our freedom is under threat. Our way of life in America is under threat. Threat from forces within, from the enemy within. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, let me introduce Martin. He's our systems researcher, and he is also a patriot. Welcome back, Martin. Thanks for joining me on the GoldFish Report again.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
First, I have to put out a disclaimer. I wanted to let our viewers know that there may be information presented here that may challenge your belief systems, may challenge your concept of what how you view the world, or what you thought you know about the world. Our intent here is just to provide information to help you expand your mind and expand your thinking about the world that we live in, and really, what does it, what value is it to you? What value do you place on it? And with this is really intended for people who have a serious interest in wanting to really restore and save the principles that America stands for and has always stood for, and that is freedom. That is that man was created equal. That if you believe that, when you read the Declaration of Independence, this preamble to the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if you're interested in that, then you're in the right place. But if you're not, please don't tune into this broadcast, because it's not going to be something you're interested in. If you're interested in socialism, communism, Marxism, Taoism, any of those isms, except patriotism. If you're a patriot, we don't want you. If you're a patriot, You're welcome. Take a seat and hope you enjoy the show. We are going to be doing these live stream. We have the chat going, so I see everybody filling in here. Audrey Ewis is going to join us in the second half of the program, because really the whole purpose of Ascension Radio, the whole message that Audrey Ewis has also been sharing, is what can we do individually? And Martin is here to tell us why we should do something, why we must do something, why we must do it ourselves. Why there's only so much that the president is responsible for. There's only so much the government should do. And what is it? Just like President Kennedy said, don't ask what the government can do for you, ask what you can do for your government. That's what this is about tonight. And if you want, so let me start it out with this. Martin, did you noticed, I'm sure you noticed that I said unalienable rights. Everybody has heard that term in the preamble as unalienable, but quite honestly, a lot of people are confused over that definition. And I'd like you to weigh in on that, and I'm going to screen share. I know our radio viewers won't be able to benefit. They're not going to be able to see the screen, but I went to etymology.com and we looked up the word unalienable, and it says not alienable. Some people say alienable, but is it really? So let's click on alienable and see what it says. And it says that alienable means that can be surrendered or given up. That's what it means. It means these are not rights that can be surrendered or given up. So having said that, it's a nice little segue and entrance into the program. I want to ask and invite Martin to comment on that and put that into perspective for us, if you would.
Well, if you think about it, if you've ever had an IRS issue, or you've had somebody where they claim that you owe them, they put a lien on your stuff. They lien it to where you're not able to use it, or you're not able to sell it without doing some certain thing. What the founding fathers were saying was, you have these rights, and if you have the right mode of expressing those rights, they can't be taken from you. They can't make you give them up. And the founding fathers, when they established this republic, they started out and realized that if they were to do this, that they were going to make enemies of England and the king. Maybe not the people, but the kingdom itself and his rule of law. So they knew that they had to protect themselves, and they knew that the creator had the creator's law. And I remember, and I'm going to paraphrase a lot because I'm not a Bible scripture, I'm not a theologian, but I know that from just studying the little things I've seen, there was a thing where Jesus was talking to Moses, and he told Moses that you're not teaching the law properly. It's not the law of sacrifice, like your firstborn or your first calf or whatever. It was the law of sacrifice to get into heaven. It was the law of trust. And once you understand trust law, this is one of the most powerful laws out here. We always talk about common law. We talk about admiralty law. We talk about statutory law. We talk about legislative law. But the law of trust is the one law that we can use, that we can then create our rights. Because if you don't know what your rights are, you're saying, okay, I have this, according to the Declaration of Independence, we have unalienable rights. Well, what are those rights? And how do you establish those rights? Everybody says, well, they're God-given rights. Well, if you never express those rights in a manner that someone else can see those rights, then how is it you can then enforce the fact that you have these rights? I've been in so many courtrooms where I've come into a courtroom and a judge, and they have this party will come in and they'll say, well, I have these Constitution rights. I'm protected by the Constitution. Right. And I've had one judge actually say, hey, don't bring that Constitution into my courtroom. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it was like, okay, what did we do wrong? How is it he can't see? How is it that he cannot see these rights that we're claiming that we have? And what it is it's the ability to have a trust and to create a trust and have a trust that expresses those rights that you feel that you have been granted by your creator, that they're between you and the creator, and these are the rights that you have as long as you follow the trust relationship that you've created with the creator. In my case, I feel I have 3 major points to my trust with my creator. He owns everything. I don't own anything. Nothing out here belongs to me. Nothing. I can't, if I claim ownership of anything, what I'm doing is trespassing on all of his stuff. So that's one element. The other element is that I'm not to cause harm or do damage to anything out here that belongs to him. So if I'm looking at everything, we're looking at our bodies, we're looking at the planet, we're looking at all the everything, the metals, the resources, everything belongs to him. So we're here as the founding fathers said, we're here as stewards. We're here to do stewardship, to be the stewards to each other, to ourselves, to the planet. But if we don't, and that's what they call in trust world, they call that an implied trust. That's just something you just take it as, okay, that's something that's implied. We're implying that we have this trust arrangement. But once we start talking about it, then we express this trust. Now other people can see the relationship that we have with our creator, with each other. This was the foundation of what the founding fathers established before they ever established the Declaration of Independence. They established that they had a trust relationship with their creator. They all met and together and agreed that they all had a relationship that they were going to uphold. This is the obedience part of a trust arrangement, where a trust arrangement is if you breach that trust in the at-law world out here with the legal system and at-law, if you breach trust, that's like in military, it's treason. That's a hanging offense. Mm-hmm. That's how severe it is. Then so when you learn exclusive equity jurisprudence and apply that to trust, mm-hmm. That's when you have the ability to then express your rights and have them protected, or what and see, this is the one key word we have to quit saying is protected. According to the Constitution, they're secured. Yeah. They're secured rights, not protected rights. They're secured rights.
Well, let me just, if you don't mind, interject for just a minute, because what I want to do is the president tonight was speaking at it's Turning Point USA, which is a college organization. And I just want to, screen share just a minute of what he was saying, because the president, if you notice, repeatedly talks to us about this, and here he's stating this himself. This was just 2 hours ago, folks. So I want to screen share this, and I'm going to play this for just a minute.
You're the fearless young leaders and warriors who stare down the hatred of the radical left and bravely fight for our liberty, our values, and our God-given freedom.
Okay. Bingo. Our God-given freedom. You notice how he emphasizes that. And he referred to us as, the patriots who are on the front line, staring down the adversaries of our republic. And it's so important to the president, and he reiterates this because why? Because it tells us, and Martin, recently you were on the GoldFish Report talking about this, that this is so fundamental, to our Declaration of Independence, that it's the instructions on how to retain our freedom. It's instructions. It's telling us in the event, and let me I'll screen share this as well, because I'd like people to take a look at this, because it says that in the course of history, let me see front. It's not giving me that link. It's to fight tyranny. And when we find that our representatives are not representing the people anymore. How many times on our POTUS reports with Jim Fetzer have we talked about how most of Congress has dual citizenship to Israel? We have former Congresswomen Cynthia McKinney, stating that she was forced to swear an oath to Israel when she was sworn in as a congresswoman. I hope you are hearing this. I hope America is hearing this, because this is outrageous, and it should outrage you, that we should not have any allegiance to any other country but our own. Where did that come from? I think this support to Israel has been way, way out of proportion. It's one thing to support them. It's and to support them politically. It's another thing, the billions of dollars we're sending to them. It's another thing to have dual citizenship. Well, how can we have, Martin? How can we have these dual citizens? How do we know? Thank you for your super chats too, folks. I know there's a few people who I haven't seen to thank you for your chats, but thank you so much for your super chats. It's a grave concern. George Washington, in his farewell address, stated that we have no business being in the affairs of other countries in that manner, and that we should mind our business, unless, and it's one thing to have diplomatic relationships, but it's another thing. So, Martin, we have a Congress now, and we can see this through this fake. Oh, thank you, Goddess Sanctuary Spa. I'm talking live to the people in the chat, and I'm also going to kind of pop over to MPAC to see if anybody has comments over there in the Impact chat room. And I mean, they have comments, but they don't have questions yet. So folks, I will be going back and forth. Don't freak out about it, because that's how it works on a live stream. And we are simulcasting. We're trying to, I'm a pretty good multitasker, so I think I can handle it. But Martin, here we have the president, right? No due process during this impeachment process. The Senate has not been given, yeah, I'm on YouTube. I see it on YouTube, but the stream might not be working, actually. I just need to stop for 1 second, and I need to give Ardrios, our engineer here, I need to give him the actual live chat link, because I had to change that. And I'm also going to tweet that really quick. So hold on 1 second. Link on YouTube. So what I'm saying here is that even the president right now is not even being afforded due process. So you can see that something really rotten is going on within our country, within our Congress. We are, sadly, this is a very scary thing. We're not, we're in jeopardy of losing this republic if we, the people, don't step up and do our role. I mean, President Trump doesn't have a magic wand. You can see he meets, immense opposition with the good things that he's trying to do. Okay, thanks, Operation Theater. You'll let me know that the live stream is going okay. I love you guys. I mean, this is why we do it. I don't need to do this for myself, but I want to do it for you. Because not only was the president denied due process, they're lying. I mean, Congress, correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, but Congress is committing fraud, because they know that what's going on they know that this impeachment there's no crime. They drafted articles of impeachment and there's no crime. How could they, vote? That's why Pelosi's not passing this over to the Senate, because it's going to blow it all apart. But this doesn't just happen to the president, folks. This happens to a lot of people. And Martin, intimately well, as you said, you've been, with clients who have gone into court, and you've been in there with me. And everybody knows that right now I'm fighting for our First Amendment right, because my First Amendment fight is your First Amendment fight. And anybody that has a First Amendment lawsuit, it's everybody's First Amendment lawsuit. So it happens every day in our courts that we're denied due process. And unless you have deep pockets that you can litigate this, for years and years and years, or do it all yourself or whatever. I mean, this is unfathomable to think that people can litigate for years and years and years on end. So this is corruption what's going to happen, and Q is talking, and I know I appreciate one of our viewers here talking about, right, Q. And Q is great because Q keeps saying Israel is saved for last, and that's great. And I think we're getting ready to see that, because it seems like all those professors who testified against Trump, who had nothing, there was no evidence of wrongdoing. They were all Jewish, and they called it the Jew coup. And I'm probably going to get banned for that, but I'm only quoting what somebody else had said. So this is what is going to unfold, is people are going to see corruption like they have never seen anything before. They have never even thought this kind of corruption could happen. And that's when Donald Trump is trying to expose it, and he's trying to, well, actually, he's trying to fix it. So they are exposing themselves. But we have an obligation as part of the this trust that Martin's talking about, part of this trust arrangement with our Creator, and part of the trust arrangement that we have with the Declaration of Independence. It's we, the people, we are the Union, members of the Union. And okay, right, Ascension Radio lost its sound, but I think they're back up, and maybe Audrey can just send me a little message in Skype just to let me know if he I think he was able to get it back, because I do see his link up here. So thanks for letting me know, Shari. Okay, excellent. Okay, good. Everything is back up. Great. He sent me the message. So, Martin, I'd like you to comment, because, you know, the president's talking about putting America first, and he's doing everything he can to undo all the 16-year plan. Of course, they were only able to really do 8 years of that with Obama, but they've been it's a tiptoe to totalitarianism where the Democrats were bringing us. And, you know, I don't really want to think of this as left and right, folks. I want to think of this as right and wrong. And there's a right way to uphold our American. We're supposed to be the light of the world, folks, and they were going to dim our light. They were going to shut the light out, and we need to realize that we are up against an enemy within. And yes, Q is part of that. The alliance is there to clean a lot of this up, drain the swamp, as the president says, but they're not going to do it all for us. And so Audrey Ewis has talked about this as well, and Martin is here to talk about what we can do, what we should do, what we ought to do ourselves in terms of, you know, cleaning up. What are we responsible for? What did the Creator? So Martin says to me, Martin, why don't you go ahead and I think you know what I'm talking about. You said, what did you promise God when you incarnated here, or when you came down here? And then you start from there if you want to, because I thought that was a really great way to broach that topic.
Well, when I first discovered trusts, and somebody had asked me, what was the first trust arrangement you believe you got into? And that was the one where I was studying something, an Egyptian medical method of going back in time in your mind and healing an issue you had. And what you do is, say, like you had a knee injury or something, you would go back in time and think about what your knee felt like at the best time. And I had a knee injury, so I was going back in my mind trying to think about when my knee felt the best. And I thought, well, that's about when I was 10 or 11, 12 years old, and I was playing on a muddy basketball court, jumping up and down. So I started putting that in my head and to fix my knee. But so I was in that kind of thought process when somebody asked me, well, what was the first trust arrangement you thought you got into? And I started going back. I thought, you know what? I bet you 10 to 1 I was out in the universe, and I went to the Creator of this universe, and I said, you know what? I'd like to go down to that planet down there, and I'd like to have one of those bodies down there, and I'd like to have an experience. So I'm asking the Creator, is that possible? And the Creator says, you know what? I haven't got a problem with that, but you got to remember, everything down there I created. These are all my creations, everything down there. So I agree, as long as you don't cause any harm, don't do any damage, and make sure that you leave it better than when you got there. So I said, okay, I can do that. So the execution of that trust was your birth. So when I made that realization of that trust arrangement, I looked down at the first thing he granted me was this body. And I seen this big spare tire and I went, holy cats. First thing right off the bat, I'm in breach of trust. I breached the very first thing he said was take care of things, take care of the things that are mine, take care of them. And that from that point on, I realized that this arrangement, and it's really interesting because the windows of knowledge opened up exponentially when I realized I didn't own anything. Nothing here was mine. It was mine to take care of, but it wasn't mine. I didn't create it. I was granted it. I was gifted this, gifted my knowledge. I was gifted my abilities. I was gifted the things around me to shelter, the food, the different things that I studied. And that, at that point is when I really started digging deeper into what is a trust? What's it mean to be involved in a trust, and what a trust does for you? If you, and it's funny because all the really think about this. If you look around you, you'll see you have the Bill Gates Foundation, that's a trust. You have the Carnegie Foundation, that's a trust. You have the Rockefeller Foundation, that's a trust. All these people that have means have these trusts. Why? Because these trusts are there's a big rock on the outside of Rockefeller Center, according to what I've been told. I haven't seen it visually, but I've heard that it says, own nothing, control everything. So I started thinking, well, okay, what's that mean? That means that you take everything that you are a steward over and you put it into a trust. Now the trust has the ability, is holding it, but it's not in your name. It's not you. But then if you have control of that trust, then you have control of all that means. So if somebody comes in, so then you basically are insolvent. And I seen this happen in a court in Virginia one time, and I tried to figure out what this was meaning was. I was in court helping this person in court, and there was this gentleman from Colombia, and he was there against a company, and this company he owed $20,000 to. So the judge was talking to the gentleman, and he explained. He says, "Okay, my father died a few years back. He left us an inheritance. My sister spent all the money. I just came back from Colombia because I had to take my mother to Colombia because the medical treatment in Colombia is cheaper. I had to borrow the money from friends to come here because I knew it was important for me to be here." And the judge says, "Okay, so let me get this straight. Do you have a job in Colombia?" He says, "No." "Well, do you have a job here in Virginia?" He says, "No." So you have no income, right? And you don't have any inheritance. You don't have any money from your. He says, "No, I borrowed the money to get here from friends to get to this court case." And these are the words out of the judge's mouth that made me think, what in the world is he talking about? He says to this gentleman, "Well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go over here to this table, and I'm gonna have one of the clerks come out, and I want you to fill out this affidavit of insolvency, and I want you to sign it, and I will take the money out of your estate and pay the company." He didn't say, "I'm going to take it out of your father's estate or your mother's estate." He says, "I'm going to take it out of your estate and I'm going to pay the company." What estate is he talking about? What is it? What is he? Where? I don't get it. What is it that this judge is talking about? So then it's been reported many times over and over that the birth certificate is a security that they're using to create funds. So that is basically what they call a legal estate. Now, why they create this legal estate is very interesting, because I studied this thing called the CAFR accounts. And this is where they take all the investment money from each county, each city, each county, each state, and they invest it into these different things. And then it's basically all the taxation for all the companies. And then they multiply it through investments. When I found out what this was and how they did this, because when I did this research in 2006, they sent $18 trillion from the state of Washington back to the federal government. because that was what was left over after the state used all of its funds. So I thought, well, okay, so where's this money go? So I went and they said that all CAFRA monies are recorded in the counties and in the cities at your libraries. It's in the research section of the library. You can go look up CAFRA accounts. You pull it out the CAFRA book and it shows how much money is made in each state or each city, each county, and each state. And then so I went to this little town I was in and I looked up, and the county or the city of this city made $1.9 billion. I thought, well, that's interesting. So I pulled down the 2007 budget for that city. It was $350 million for their budget. So that means there's a surplus. Where does that money go? Well, that money goes to the county. Then that money goes from the county, goes to the state. Same process, and it goes from the state and it goes to the federal. So I went to a congressman. I said, hey, look, we got a lot of people out here that could use this money you guys are shipping in. And I said, what do you guys do with this money? And I was explained to me that the money is used for a natural disaster, a hurricane, a volcano, a tsunami, an earthquake, any kind of natural. I said, well, isn't people losing their homes? Isn't that kind of like a disaster? Well, but it's not allocated for that. You can't spend it that way. So then I started researching, well, why are they creating these securities for the birth certificates? What's this mean? A birth certificate is a security, and they can trade these securities and do these different things. What I found out was they do this in case, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you and all your family members are on a train, and there's 200 other family members, and you're having this big gathering from all these different families, and the train crashes, and everybody in the family passes away except for you, and you're a paraplegic. You can't take care of yourself, but you're still alive. So who's going to have to take care of you? And according to the Constitution of each state, there's a phrase inside each one of those. It's called the doctrine of parens patria. And that doctrine states that they claim to be your parent, and under that doctrine, they take care of you if no one else can. So if they realize that they're going to have to take care of you, are they going to want to take, and if something were to happen, and take and pull money out of their budget to pay your bills to make sure that you're hospitalized and taken care of as a paraplegic? No, they want to set up something that creates a revenue stream. So if it was to happen, they'd have access to this revenue stream to take care of you. What happens? I was going to say, what happens is when you pass away, that money is ex-cheated back to the state. They get it back. In one county down in Texas, they made over $12 billion in 1 year on ex-cheated money coming back to the state from people who didn't make a claim to that legal estate.
Okay, let me just interject here for a minute, because I think before we go too quickly into this topic, or I don't want to actually gloss over it, because this concept of parens patriae, folks, you don't know it until you're in a situation and that you don't want to be in. Because if they're using parens patriae on you, you're going to fall in a situation where you're going to lose your rights, or what rights you think you have. It's going to be your wake-up call. You're going to that's the moment when you fall down the rabbit hole and you find out that that this world is not constructed the way you've been told and you've been educated that it's been constructed. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by that. So parens patriae is because, okay, when you were born, your parents got a Social Security card for you. But before that, they signed your birth certificate. You want to explain that, Martin, what that meant?
You applied for a birth certificate. You applied to be governed by the state.
Okay.
Your parents applied,
Yeah.
and they thought that it was something they had to do in order for you to be able to function and have identification in your future.
But And at some point, they applied for a Social Security card in SS5 form, which nobody tells you that this is what you're doing. There's no notice given to you that you're signing away your God-given rights for something called benefit privilege. So that's why you have to apply for a license to drive. That's why you have to apply for a license to go fishing. That's why you have to apply for licenses to do what should be God-given to you: the right to transport, to move around, to fish and eat, find food for yourself. And so when you sign these, your parents signed that birth certificate, it meant that parents patriae meant we're going to be your parent, because here's your birth certificate, you're a baby, you're an infant, and you're going to be that way the rest of your life, unless by the age of 7 you claim that you're, a live human being, or because all these things are done in capital letters, so it makes you a corporation. And in fact, on our Country Roads series with Winston Shrout, Winston went into great detail to talk about what it really meant in terms of what your birth certificate meant, and how the pounds and ounces really represented gold. It was a commodity. It's a financial instrument, the birth certificate. It's traded on the stock exchange. It's also used in courts. It's used anywhere you put your signature someplace, as a bill of exchange. And that's how these CEOs make gazillions of dollars when they become CEOs of these companies. Let's just say you're a credit card company and you want to get Norhide laws. Yes, thank you. When you want to get people to buy your, to contract with you for a credit card, right? And you have them sign an application. Well, you were denied because your credit score wasn't that good, but they have your signature. And the minute they have your signature, they can take that to the Treasury and they can monetize it. And that's what they do. Anytime you put your signature on something, you're essentially allowing somebody to rob your strawman account, which is the Treasury Direct accounts. These are our prepaid accounts. Again, on our Country Road series that we did with Winston Shrout, he explained how we have prepaid accounts. Okay. Now, a lot of people who may be very religious may not agree with this concept here, but when Jesus was on the cross, that was an accounting sheet. When you had the debits on one side, the credits on the other side, Jesus came to redeem our debts with prepaid accounts. So our debts were prepaid, right? So that's what Jesus died on the cross for our sins. He prepaid our debts for us, right? Prepaid our sins for us, right? So, and Winston gave us an awful lot of wisdom, didn't he? Didn't he, Martin?
Yeah, he did.
He did. And so what I'm getting at here is that in a lot of our QSIP number, yes, thank you, Slim. What I'm getting at here is the problem that we find ourselves in today is that we are under a false, a corporation, United States corporation. And what President Trump's trying to do is he's trying to restore the republic, from my understanding. But we also have a responsibility to do that. I hear Drake Bailey talking on his Cosmic Voice program that, things are going to get a little bit messy before they get better. That, if you're part of a militia, or if you're thinking about joining one, well, you might want to think about doing that now, because what's going to happen is there's 140,000 sealed indictments that are going to be acted upon, and we don't know when, and they can't come soon enough, but everything is a matter of time. And the corruption that the president's trying to clean up, it's going to be seen, it's going to be visible, and there's going to be a lot of people. Once these people are all indicted, the first one might be Brennan. The first one that's going to be unsealed, according to Q, might actually be Brennan. And look, Admiral Rogers was there, and Q just posted about this from the beginning. Was there. He's the one who had that meeting with President Trump in Trump Tower, informing him that he was being unlawfully spied on by the DNC. So Admiral Rogers, I think, has been involved with this whole Q process with the president, but that's just my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong about this, but so what we're finding is all of this corruption, all of this hoodwinking of humanity, right? This is all going to come to an end. It's going to transition, but we can't just, if people don't know about this, Martin, people don't understand how this has happened, how long it's taken, how long we've been under this illusion of being free, because we have step by step have had our constitutional protections encroached upon, infringed upon, little by little, and that's how they do it. They do it incrementally so people don't, go crazy. But this is also the strategy the Q team has, is that they have to do things. They have to do things. Q says optics are very important, so that's what's playing out right now. Optics, the optics, the optics about seeing the corruption firsthand and watching it play out. Parents patriot means, okay, so since you never claimed yourself to be a live human being, you signed yourself and your rights over with this birth certificate, this social security card, and you haven't come to the court and said, well, I'm an adult now. And you don't need to be my parent. You don't need, I mean, literally, folks, we have to do this. Can you imagine? We actually have to do this. We actually have to authenticate our birth certificates to the Secretary of State and present it to the court and say, we're not a corporation. You don't have jurisdiction over us because we're a live human being. And so, and let me tell you, that hasn't gone over well because, initially they honored it once in a while to people here and there, but the reality is, the more, Winston's work became very popular and it was a threat to the deep state. And they have wrongfully, just like what they're doing to the president, they've done to Winston Shrout. They created false charges, they created false, a narrative, and they convicted him. And Winston, sadly, is in prison. He's actually in what was described to me as a FEMA camp in Pahrump, Nevada. And he's there with a lot of other patriots. And it's a problem because these are people who also were educated. They were smart enough to figure out how to do these things. There's some people who trying to regain their sovereignty, and that's not permitted. This is a prison planet. We're hostages. It's not permitted for you to get out of the system. You're a threat to them. And this is what's happened. And it's very sad to see that this is what's happened to Winston, who is a dear friend of mine and somebody who really cared about people, who put the commercial lien against the Federal Reserve, the Northern Trust Corporation, which is the holding company for the Federal Reserve, the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements. And he put them into commercial dishonor, and they could not renew their charter. Boy, he made enemies, but he was working for the people. So what I'm saying is that is your freedom worth fighting for? What are you willing to do to fight for your freedom? Because as the president said tonight, right, that we are in the trenches, right, against the left-wing arsonists. That's his quote, who want to destroy our Constitution, who want to destroy our country. And as members of the Union, that it states in the Declaration of Independence, we have an obligation. Let me tell you, folks, if we don't all step up to the plate and do something, then everything our forefathers did is for naught. You might as well throw it in the garbage. You might as well take your Declaration of Independence, crumple it up, and throw it in the garbage if you're not willing to stand up and fight for what is God-given and what is yours, as the president said tonight. So, Martin, I wanted to explain, so parents patriot, and my personal experience with that was after I attended a town hall meeting, which is a right to assemble, put into our Constitution, right to assemble, right to ask for a redress of grievance. I was targeted because I was in the media. I was interviewed by someone when I attended this town hall meeting, and I asked for redress of grievance because there was what I felt was a lack of due process in the civil justice system. And do you know that the judge, so a lot of my viewers know I've been in litigation for 8 years, and I want it to end. I'm tired of it. But I was targeted, and make no mistake about it, that I was targeted because I did that. Because I went to a town hall meeting and I expressed problems with the civil justice system. Now, they are the gatekeepers for the globalists. Okay, attorneys turn for the king. If the king wants something of yours, they send an attorney, and the attorney comes and he takes it, uses the law to take it. And we were supposed to have separated ourselves from the king, from the queen, but apparently we haven't, because we still have attorneys, and they're not supposed to be in office, by the way, folks, which we all know that too, but we allow it. We're letting it happen. But what they did was they used parens patriae. I'm sorry, it's a little bit winding, but they used parens patriae to retaliate against me. And they took custody of my kids from me. They wanted to break me. They wanted to break me. That's what they tried to do. And I've been fighting and fighting. And for almost 100 days, I didn't have my children because I was a threat. I went to a town hall meeting. Well, it just turns out, so whatever. Got custody, 50% of custody back of my kids. And what happened was this litigation just kept going, because you can't just go in there and use parens patriae to take, and it wasn't like CPS did it. It was a family court judge who did it, who took custody of my kids away. Now, I did nothing wrong. I was not a drug addict, although I had reconstructive surgery on my ankle. I'm going to show you this picture. That's my ankle. Okay. I had 2 reconstructive surgeries, and yeah, I was on pain medication. It hurt like hell. But no, they had to create a fake narrative, and they had to push that narrative, and they had to make up a story based on, one element of truth, that they build this whole house of cards of, and one judge, when I appealed it, they went and they covered up for the other judge. And then at the appellate court, they covered up for the lower court. And I just said, enough of this, we're going to federal court. Because at this point, what ended up happening was this fake narrative just got out of control. It was a wild, fire. And all of this was going on the record, all of these horrible things, that this narrative that they created, because they wanted to silence me. And so we're in a custody hearing arguing for my First Amendment rights. Okay. I never hurt the children. I never was at risk of anything. I mean, I'm a good mom. I love my kids more than anything in this world. I couldn't imagine this happened to me. I couldn't imagine the devastation, the shock, just the shock of realizing this shouldn't happen to me. I was, teaching CCD at my church. I worked at the food pantry for 5 years, always giving to other people, always helping other people, always generous to other people. Don't have hate and spite in my heart, anything like that. I didn't want to do anything, never wanted to ever hurt anybody. You can't imagine the power the state can bring down on you when you're a threat to them. So this is what they've done to a lot of people, not just myself, and I'm still fighting this. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this has everything to do with what Martin's talking about. And if you don't really know what parens patriae is, folks, trust me, you don't want to find out the hard way. It was a complete abuse of power. This is what we're talking about. When you see the president going through the same thing, they take a shred of truth, right? A shred of truth that the president, there wasn't even any truth. I mean, Ed Papadopoulos saying, "Oh, I think I heard the Russians might have something on, Hillary Clinton." Well, that started the whole thing, right? It was hearsay, secondhand hearsay. And that launched an investigation globally for global surveillance on the Trump campaign. This is what I'm talking about. This is abuse of power by the state. This is what our Declaration of Independence was drafted for. It was that when these powers come to that kind of measure, it's up to the people to take control of, and that's why they started to form common law courts, because in the Articles of Freedom, in the Bill of Rights, it gives us that power for us to form our own courts and our own ability to remedy the situation. So Martin, we're talking about a remedy, and it's a lot more complicated than this, but we are talking about a remedy. I mean, when you have judges, this week the president appointed 13 more federal judges, which brings it to a total of 187 federal judges since President Trump was inaugurated, put into office. He's trying to get judges in there who will interpret the Constitution and not arbitrarily, what's that, commit fraud, you said?
Ignore it.
Ignore it, exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about abuse of process, abuse of power, fraud. What Congress is doing to the president is done to us every single day. And when you think you're doing something good and you think that you're out there and you're trying to be a good American and you're trying to stand up for your rights, this is what we're talking about. And yes, so there's supposed to be a lot of things that are going to fix this, and there's going to be the Bill of Rights. Thanks, Slim. Highest law of the land, laid down by the people. So, do you want to comment on that, Martin?
Well, that Bill of Rights, in my opinion, it's an overview. It's a thing that we recognize, but have we ever put that into something and expressed it personally, individually, or we just assume it's a Bill of Rights for the collective? So if there's this thing in the at law that they love to use, and that's presumptions and assumptions. And if you don't repudiate any of their presumptions or assumptions, then they assume that you agree. And it's just like a tennis match. If they bat something into your court and you don't do anything about it, then you agree and accept it through this acquiescence and silence. And you can do the same thing with them. If you bat something into their court and they don't respond, you have the same ability. But if you, and I did this in a court case in Maryland, where the first thing we did with this gentleman who had a foreclosure was that we created a trust arrangement with the circuit court of the county we were having this issue with. So we had created a trust arrangement between the homeowner and the county court system through the highest ranking official in that. So it was the chief judge of the circuit court of this particular county. Now you're laying the foundation of having the ability to then hold them accountable. So do you think they responded? No. Using the principles of exclusive equity jurisprudence, we perfected that title of trust between this homeowner and the county court system. Then we created another trust between the homeowner and the bank that was trying to take his home, and the bank's legal team that was representing the bank. We created another trust. So at this point now, we have these trust arrangements. And again, we batted the ball called the trust into their court. They looked at it and said, oh, it's one of these patriot, blah, 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 whatever things. This doesn't mean anything. And they just ignored it. Once we perfected it, then we were in court for 4 years on this gentleman's home. We never stepped foot in the court once during that 4 years because we used the principles of exclusive equity jurisprudence, because in exclusive equity, there's a principle that's called equity acts in personam. This is where you have to do things in person. You relay things in person. So everything that we entered into the court, we entered into the judge's chambers directly, either by private process server or the homeowner himself served it onto the judge. Now we already, like I said, we created a foundation of setting up a trust relationship between the homeowner and the county court system. And then this judge, being a representative of that court system, was also a party to this trust. Now we continue to put things into the case, deny. So we got to a point where we had a really large portfolio of entries into the case. Now, they can't put that information into the public because the public's not a party to the trust. But what did the judge do? Ignored the arrangement, ignored the relationship. And this is the thing that I'm pretty sure that what happened was this lower judge was never notified of this arrangement that we had with the court system. So they continued to put the stuff we were putting into the case on the record. So then we filed for an interlocutory appeal. That means we're filing for an appeal before the case is done. Usually you file an appeal after you have a judgment of some sort. Either you have a judgment or you have some kind of, issue that's been settled. But an interlocutory appeal is like in the middle. You're making a complaint that something's happening here that shouldn't be going on. And we informed the appellate court that the court was in breach of that trust arrangement between the homeowner and the county court system. The appellate court, now we had an order that we wanted the judge to sign that basically said that this homeowner was entitled to all rights, title, and interest in anything that the bank had created in regards to the note that he had signed at closing. And if any of you guys have been aware of this, I know a gentleman who did the research on his note. He had a $450,000 house. And in 3 years, he went to the SEC and he pulled all the records out that this bank had done. And he found within just 3 years of the time he signed the note, in 3 years, they had made $95 million in investments from the securitization of his house. Well, this gentleman I was working with, it was only like a $250,000 house. So you can imagine it's somewhere in the maybe $50 million, $60 million they made. But this is over a 16-year period. This guy was only talking about a 3-year period. So now we had this order in there. One day, this homeowner gets a letter from the court, and it was the order, and it was signed by the judge with a wet ink signature. It wasn't a copy. It had the clerk's raised seal on the actual document. So I made the effort. I wanted to get what you call a certified copy, because a certified copy of anything is self-authenticating evidence. So when I called to the lower court to get a copy, they said that no, that case had been moved to the appellate court. You'll need to get that from the appellate court. I called the appellate court. I said, I need to get a certified copy. They said, oh no, that order remained at the lower court. We don't have that order. So I called back down to the lower court and I talked to the clerk. Before I talked to somebody, one of the clerk's assistants, but this time I talked to the clerk directly. And I said to the clerk, I am seeking a certified copy of this order that was signed on this date and this case number. And these were the words out of this clerk that I'll never forget. She said, oh, you mean the one that the appellate court called down here and told the judge to sign? Now, why would the appellate court call down to the lower court and say, sign this order? Because the appellate court had realized we had that lower court in breach. We could take and shut down that court system because of their actions and not paying attention to the trust arrangement that they had acquiesced to. So they were hoping what would happen is that maybe he'd sign this order, he would go to take it to the bank, and then the bank would have to give up all the assets and he'd be happy and leave us alone. So what happened was the gentleman I was helping ended up getting cancer and passing away before we had a chance to act on it.
Well, let me put things into perspective a little bit for some viewers, Martin. What do we need to do? Because you're talking about exclusive equity, that there's another jurisdiction, okay? Because we're under admiralty law right now, and there's another jurisdiction that you're saying is equity, and it's called exclusive equity. When you're in a chancery court, you're in concurrent equity. You've taught me that pretty well. The problem is that, they don't like this. They don't like when you come in there and you know how then the court really works and how to take control of it. I do think that there's a plan for this. I do think that that the president is working on making this transition for us. But there's still a responsibility that each one of us has. I mean, we have to hold our government accountable. What can the people do to hold our government more accountable? Do we need to form militias? Do we need to form common law courts? Because people are doing it. There are militias. There are common law courts. There's a lot of people doing this.
Louisa, this is the simplest thing we can do. You just keep mentioning it over and over. We're in a union. We're the American Union. This is the biggest union that is for the people. This is the republic from the bottom up, not the top down. But the union, we have to realize we're members of a union. And if you've ever been a member of a union, you know that in a contract it says you have the right to redress of grievances. Just like the Constitution says, you have this right to redress of grievances.
Right.
How do we state these grievances? And what we do is it's petition. We need to put together just right now to help this president to be able to root out this corruption, to shine the light on this corruption. We, as members of this union, need to get signatures on a petition of no confidence vote against the House of Representatives and the majority party. This is how we start, by getting them out of office, by have a vote of no confidence. This is how you work in a union. If you're members, and your people on the call right now, you're members of a union. I was a president of a local union. I was in the printers union. And this is how we have to look at ourselves as union members. We need to put together petitions, and you can go onto the internet and you can find how to write a petition. It's not hard, and get signatures on these petitions. Compile all of these petitions together, and one person take these petitions with one overriding petition to Chief Justice Roberts of the Supreme Court directly, and then get an injunction against the Congress until all Congress, this is my opinion, we need to have this injunction needs to be, and this petition needs to be, that we're petitioning for an injunction and for an investigation into every member of Congress to see that they are not in breach of their fiduciary duty to their constituents. If they're not representing their constituents, they are not doing their fiduciary duty to their constituents, and they need to be removed.
All right, that's what you wanted to talk about. I mean, that was the big message today that you wanted to talk about. And I guess, I wanted to set some framework and groundwork in order to, show that there was a that, you know, a lot of people feel disempowered, totally disempowered. They know there's corruption in the government and they feel like they are absolutely disempowered, disenfranchised, and unable to do anything about it. But you're saying that we can, and that we should hold Congress accountable and require that they're investigated. And who are you suggesting that we should? Oh, you're suggesting that we request the military to do this. Is this correct?
No. We're going straight to the Supreme Court of the United States, Chief
I
Justice
see.
Roberts of the Supreme Court, with our petition for him to install an injunction into Congress until all Congress is investigated and root out all of the people. Because I do believe there are so many entrenched congressmen in both the Senate and the House of Representatives that are just like Joe Biden and his son. Pelosi's son has got some high-ranking job that she got him doing something. All these people are not there for the interest of the constituents they represent, or there wouldn't be homeless people on the streets.
Oh no, California is a disaster. I mean, their districts are absolutely, but that's part of the plan. Their plan is to, their plan was not something good for America that the president's been trying to tell us. And we can see that if we just look at their districts. It's a pigsty. I mean, you know, there's now street signs on the side of the street warning people of human feces. That's what's deplorable, folks. And it shouldn't be okay with you. But everybody is very busy, you know, living their own life, turning their cheek and looking the other way. In the meantime, our republic is crumbling. And this is the time, as members, we're all members of this union, that we realize that it's time. And of course, we have the military and this Q, the alliance behind Q, that I believe is doing this. Because of course, what did the military do? The military took an oath. They swore to defend America from enemies, foreign and domestic. And that's what they're doing. But when you have the enemy within that has infiltrated every aspect of society, education, politics, you know, government, you know, religion, and you just keep going. How do you fight that enemy within? And you have to do it very, what is the term? Covertly. And the president, you know, has actually, I keep saying the president, but we don't know who Q is. Q has stated multiple times that in order to avoid national security issues, they have to, you know, use the whoever's doing this insurgency, as General Flynn said, an army of digital soldiers. They used and utilized the social media to not just for the Great Awakening, to awaken people to what's really going on, the corruption, the length, the depth of it, you know, the breadth of it. They're as you can see in the most recent Q posts, they're talking about that this isn't just for the people. This is a way to communicate with even other world leaders. And so this is a way to keep everybody abreast of what the progress is. And remember, disinfo is necessary. I mean, all these things are really important when it comes to the whole QAnon movement, because it's talking about, they're telling us what the plan, that there is a plan, and the plan, and you know, in the end, God wins. And I think, you know, Audrey, I know you're going to jump in at some point. So, okay, great. We're on the same wavelength. So why don't you let me just wait for him to come and unmute himself, and then we're going to have Audrey jump in and weigh in on this.
Hello,
are you
everyone.
with us, Audrey? Hi, thanks for being with
Absolutely.
us. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
keeping
much for
everything
having
going.
me. You're most welcome. So I wanted to add in, you were mentioning California and the homelessness rate there. I spent a lot of time in Oakland, California, up there in the San Francisco Bay Area. And one thing I noticed was the homelessness rate was extreme. There were people living in the parks and tents. They were in every nook and cranny of the town that you could find. There were homeless people. And you know, in a country that's supposed to be so rich, why are there so many poor here?
Huh.
You know, I find that the homelessness rate here in America is just absolutely extreme. So one thing I did want to note was you guys were talking about the straw man earlier. I wanted to add that as of House Joint Resolution 192 in 1933, They replaced the gold standard with a fiat currency. They got rid of the gold standard. But what did they replace it with? They replaced it with people. People and their birth certificates, money bonds attached to those prepaid accounts, as you guys were all talking about. I was really itching to get that out. House Joint Resolution 192. They
That's
created a
right.
new form of slavery throughout the country, silent slavery. And people are still picking cotton here in the United States. They're picking cotton every day that they work because what is U.S. money made of? It's made of cotton. Cotton. You're still picking cotton just like the days of old, in the days of the slave trade.
Hmm.
So nothing has changed. It's just evolved over a long period of time. The slave system has absolutely evolved. So with the straw man, everybody is a corporation. Well, you have a corporation that represents you, and the corporation is not owned by you. You don't own your name. Your name in all caps is not you. That name is owned by, Great Britain, quite literally, and by London. They manage it. They own all of those corporate names. So all of those names that people carry throughout the United States assigned to them by their parents that they assume that they own are not theirs. You are your own person. You are your own entity. You are not the name given to you. You are who you are. And that is the truth. People need to understand that when you go into court, when they're asking you to identify yourself, you actually don't have to identify yourself by your name. Your name is not your name. That's a corporation just as much as the United States of America, in all caps, is a corporation. You're no different than the country. But the moment you give life to your straw man, the moment you say that that is your name, the moment you put a signature down, that is when they associate that with you. So you have power as a sovereign entity. You came into this world freely without any ties, without any balls and chains on you until you were registered to the state you were within, until you were registered to the country, until you were assigned a social security number and had a birth certificate with a money bond starting out with a value of close to over $1 million. This is all money that all of you own. This is your birthright. They owe you. The country owes you. The cabal owes you. Because that money is being held currently in a Cesta K trust, which is managed by the Vatican. The Vatican is another city state in this world. There are three major city states. You have the Vatican, you have London, and you have Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., Americans associate that as being the capital of the United States, but it's actually not the capital of the United States. It's not even part of the United States. It is its own entity, its own island
Hmm.
in the United States, the way they set it up as a city state, just like back in the days of ancient Rome, that was a city state. It's Babylon, but there are three obelisks, three major obelisks.
Hmm.
The one in Washington, D.C., there's one in London, there's one in the Vatican. You find them openly, just like the obelisks of old in Egypt. In the days of ancient Egypt and Sumer, you find obelisks that represent points of power. They also represent points of control. So every city state throughout the world has an obelisk, and this obelisk is what they use to represent their control. And they each control different areas of society, each city state. You got the Vatican controlling religion, you got London controlling big money, you have Washington, D.C. controlling military power, you have, uh, you have corruption throughout all three of these city states, and all three of them are associated with giant child trafficking sex rings. It's pretty bad. However, what I will say is that there are people in the government that are working against the cabal that are trying really hard to make a difference. There are people in multiple governments throughout the world that are trying to make a difference. They're all trying to push through legislation, executive orders and other things to make a big difference in the world. Try to make change to try to establish peace. It's a way of fighting back, but this is using the legal system. This is using their governmental systems to be able to try to fight back. But if you want to fight commerce, you got to fight commerce with commerce. If you want freedom, you have to separate yourself from your straw man. You have to eliminate your straw man. How do you kill your straw man? Now that's something I
Audrey,
think Martin.
I'm sorry, I got to interrupt you. I have to interrupt you. All right, Audrey, I'm sorry. Okay. You do not want to destroy that. You want to claim that. You want to take control of it. You want to retain what they've created because you're the source of it. If it was not for you, it would not exist. You need to be able to control these different systems that now control you. You have a legal system, a medical system, a social system, a monetary system. All these systems control what you're doing. And what you need to understand is how to take control of each one of these systems. Think about this, Audrey. Let me ask you a question. Would you create a system that did not benefit you? Of course you wouldn't.
Absolutely not.
So you don't think that the systems that have been created that control you now were to the benefit the person who created that system? So if you learn how those systems were created to benefit the creator of those systems, you can then replace yourself with that creator of the system and make each one of those systems benefit you, not destroying anything, not tearing anything down, out-compete what they've already created.
That volume's a little high there, Martin. Maybe
I'm getting passionate. I'm sorry.
The volume's a little high. Maybe Audrey can turn his up a little bit. Audrey, did you? Yeah, I mean, clearly they're going to create a system that is going to benefit them, but we need to wake up and understand that. Okay, it's great. Look, we can have different angles of the same issue. It's not a problem. Be respectful about that. Audrey, did you want to comment on what Martin said, or did you want to add to that?
Well, what I was going to say is that it's all part of a much larger slave system. If the people want their sovereignty, if they want their own freedom as a living entity, there is a way to separate yourself from the system and then still be able to take care of yourself. You don't have to be part of the system, tied into it. I agree with Martin. I absolutely agree with what he's saying. It can work to your benefit too. You can also liquefy your money bonds. That's another thing.
Well, I think Sean David Morton had tried that, and then he ended up in prison for doing it.
Well,
because, again,
they don't
like it.
Yeah, they don't generally allow that to happen. But the thing is, if you use your birth certificate as collateral and you actually file a bankruptcy against your straw man, it's entirely possible to claim the value of your birth certificate and the birth certificate itself, which is the deed to you, just as much as a piece of land has a deed and a car has a title. That's the title to you. That's your deed.
Yeah,
that is
the birth certificate. I mean, Winston talks about original issue, and so we might want to go back to that Country Roads report where we talk about original issue, and that's where it all starts. So go ahead. You're right.
So as I was saying, it's entirely possible to regain your sovereignty as well from the cabal, from the system that was created around you without your permission, without your knowledge, because you were born into it, not knowing what you were born into. It's just everyday life for you. People don't realize that every day they're living as slaves. So how do they become a leader instead of a follower? How do they stand up taller? How do these people take back control of their lives, their own lives? You know, that's the thing. When you're sitting there having to pay debt that you do not owe, there's a problem. You know, debt that should not even exist. There is no debt. But the problem with currency here in the United States without a gold standard is it's based on a debt standard. And that is the truth.
That's fractional reserve, right? That's the fractional reserve spending. We know that the Federal Reserve just increased its it's what is it called, quantitative easing again. And you know that the stock market, which is with its historical highs, is a bubble that's going to burst. Now we also know that China has already issued a gold-backed gold standard currency, which is now being called the petro yuan. Now other countries in that region are also pegging their currency to that. Every country has to be on an even playing field. There can't be fair trade if you have currency wars and currency manipulation, where different countries are artificially deflating the value of their currency in order to get unfair competitive advantages in the market. So it really just puts some countries in complete abject poverty because they can't compete. So
Well,
what
look
President
at
Trump is focused, that's what President Trump is focusing on, so that we
yeah,
can
the
create this gold
revaluing of
standard.
currency.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. And here's the other thing. I mean, there are countries like Vietnam and Iraq where their currencies are so devalued that it takes close to 25,000, let's say, dinars just to equal close to 20 US dollars. It's almost 1,000 dinars to equal 1 US dollar.
Mhm.
You know, that's how low their currency is. You know, the balance is tipped off balance because these countries, although they have gold, have not been acknowledged for their value, and they're trying to get revalued. They want their currency to show its true value
Mhm.
based
Can,
on their exports and imports, and you know, based on the amount of gold that they have in oil.
Mhm.
It's all about the resources.
Okay, let me
Iraq
just
is
let
rich
Martin
in
interject.
resources.
Martin,
can
did
I
you have a
show you
comment?
something that the founding fathers created that you, if you understood
Mhm.
how this system, the republic, the founding fathers had exactly the same problems we have right now with the monetary system with the king. He wouldn't accept their script. He would only accept gold. So they were fighting the same things back then, and they created a system so unique and so powerful, but nobody realizes how it works. Thomas Jefferson made a very, very profound statement. He says that the issuance of currency should be taken from the national banks and returned to the people where it belongs. Now, let me explain how the foundation was set up by the founding fathers so that we have the ability to create our own currency every day of our life. Remember, it says the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. That means you have the same abilities that I have and anybody else has of creating your own currency to do commercial trade. And
But they
this
don't
is
like
how it was
that.
established.
But they don't like that.
They knew that everyone on this planet was a partial owner of the universe with under a usufruct with the creator. A usufruct is a statement that says you have the ability to use something as long as you do not destroy it. They set up a stewardship program under the United States corporate government. They knew it was going to turn into a corporation. They created it as a corporation when they put the Constitution in. What they did was they knew that everyone out here that wanted to create a business was going to have to use resources of the planet to create that business. And they wanted to be able to charge a usury fee for each company to be able to use the resources, but pay back the people who had the rights to those resources, called the people. So they called it a corporate tax, a business tax. And every dollar they collected, they put into the treasury under special deposit for the people. That means that it has to be returned to the people the same way it was deposited in. It has to come out the same way. So here comes the national banks, and they've seen this treasury building up and building up because all of the people back then were mostly farmers. They didn't need currency. They had no desire for currency. They were all self-sufficient. But these banks, this treasury was just getting huge. And the banks were like, how do we get our fingers on this? So they started having this, creating these national banks and regional banks and all these different banks, and they started charging you interest. So then when people would come in from the farmers or whatever would get a loan, they knew that they could get paid back by that treasury because that was the people's money. All they had to do was take the personal note that they got from the farmer and take it to the treasury. Well, Jackson says, wait a minute, hold on a second. We don't need these banks. What the people need to understand is the Treasury is your bank. The Treasury is how you conduct commerce. You write private bills of exchange called promissory notes. You take them to the Treasury. The Treasury then has the obligation to pay the debt. The whole point is between the time that Jackson killed all the banks in 1860s or 1870s when it was until 1929 when the Federal Reserve caused the Great Depression, this was the most prosperous country on the planet because all of the people who understood commerce understood that they had the ability to create private bills of exchange backed by the Treasury that they could then put into get all of the funding they needed because that Treasury belonged to the people. This is what we can do today. We can do the same thing today if you understand how the republic was formed, how it was set up for you as one of the people to be able to create. And now with the system, the way the bankers created it is so beautiful because you can create not only a promissory note that says that you're going to get the Treasury is going to reimburse your Treasury your promissory note, but you can make it negotiable. They can take that same note and trade it just like they take the note that you do for a foreclosure in a home, and you can get 20, 30, 40 times that amount as a revenue stream coming in back into the Treasury. So more people have the ability to build businesses, to build homes, to build things. This is what the founding fathers created for us if you only understood how to use it properly.
Okay, this is getting deep for a lot of people, and I know that we're getting a more limited audience the more deep we go into this topic. But I do know that once this is uploaded to the YouTube, this is to the GoldFish Report YouTube channel. This is definitely going to be available for people who haven't been able to join us. But I wanted to just point out, an article that was in the news today. RT was reporting. The headline is Bullion Beats Sanctions. Muslim states may switch to gold and barter trade. And this is, not a surprise to us. It says Iran, Malaysia, Turkey, and Qatar are looking into using gold and barter for trade to shield themselves from any future punitive economic measures, Malaysian Prime Minister Mohammed has announced. So this is not this is good because we all need to go back. There's just way too much corruption and too much corruption globally as well. And so too much corruption globally. So in order we're talking about a lot of issues, and I don't really want to get too far off the beaten path. We want to focus on what can we do. Martin's saying, okay, we need to hold Congress accountable. They all need to be investigated. I'm sure that many of them are. I mean, Martin, we could still make that effort to do that. We can still make the effort. We can still petition the Supreme Court. We can still do that. And I think we should, because I think the more support that the people show for holding the Congress accountable, I think the more people will, the more other people can see that it's not just the president that's trying to do this. It's not just political, posturing or political theater, because that's what it is. It's political theater right now. But I really do feel, and if you follow Q, I really do feel that this is all a script that's just playing out right now. I think the whole script has been written. I really do. I have a feeling that if any of us put our faith in Q at all, then you realize there is a plan and this whole thing is scripted. Now, Audrey, you might want to comment on this. They talk about Looking Glass. Do you want to comment on what Looking Glass is and how is it that this is already just a script already playing out? How do they know all this already happened?
Well, the thing is, they make use of frequency. They actually look back in time and they look forward in time. They see where the variables are going to fall using this device that they call Looking Glass.
Can you raise your volume a little, Audrey?
Here, is that better?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, I do.
Yeah, that's better. Okay, yeah.
So what I will say is that with Looking Glass, they're able to look both forward and backwards. It's a technology. It's like time travel, but instead of traveling in time, they're seeing in time. It's different. They can actually see things before they happen and try to change them before they come to pass. So these things, they get ahead of the game a lot of the time, and they use they use knowledge that they find through this looking glass to manipulate the world governments, to manipulate the flow of things, to see where things will go, which countries will rise and fall. Now, looking glass works on frequency. It actually tunes into earlier Schumann frequencies every single time, as I explained in one of my earlier broadcasts here with you. Every single time exists at the same time. Everything exists all together all at once. Okay? So when you when you look at time, it's like if you look at one timeline, it's like a linear movie. It has frames in it, and every frame you can go back to at any time. So let's say 1960 still exists, 1970 still exists, 1980 still exists. It's just on its own frequency, its own radio channel. And what they do with Looking Glass basically is turn the radio dial, change the channel, and see what they find. They can they can navigate with their vision through Looking Glass to different coordinates to see what's going on in these specific coordinates. This is why they call it Looking Glass, because it's like a scope in the sky, but it's more like a scope in time that allows them to view, kind of like a satellite in space, any point of the Earth within that time. So that's what they look at. They also look at things a little beyond that too. What's coming from space. They see ahead, so it's a little hard to fool them. However, their use of frequency to do this is an age-old technique. We've been using it where I come from for a long time, for millennia. We've been using frequency to jump. This is how we go from one point to another very fast in space.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about frequency, bending and manipulating frequency, manipulating your coordinates, and using thought and intention to be able to navigate. I know for a lot of people that have been following my broadcasts for the past 4 or 5 years. You guys have all come to know what I mean by this. One question I did want to ask Martin, jumping back to what he was talking about earlier, was what are your thoughts on A4V, accepted for value? Let's bring Martin back into the conversation.
Think about what that means. A4V, you're accepting thinking having a value, right?
Well, correct. A4V, being able to, let's say, pay your bills using the Treasury.
Well, see, now that worked for a time, but then they wrote legislation and twisted things around. This is where trusts come in, because you have the ability to write trust certificates like an A4V. A4V is great when you're accepting something for value into your trust. And you're saying, okay, I think, because some things are more valuable to you than to other people. So you may want to put something in your trust that has more intrinsic value and more value to it than someone else would. But then it still increases the amount of value in your trust, where you have the ability then to use a trust certificate, like as a means of paying off a bill, using that as an asset into your trust. A4V, as far as I experienced that back when Winston was first teaching it back, that's 2006, 2007. And it worked with the IRS, but it wouldn't work with court systems, and it wouldn't work with your everyday. You go down to the your utility pay your utility bill and try to do something like that. Wouldn't work. They wouldn't accept it. But we had several wonderful experiences with the IRS accepting the A4B, and the A4B is exactly what you're saying. Is it gives them the ability, you're accepting of a value, signing it, saying that now you're going to assign them the value back to them to be able to reach into Treasury and get compensated for that transaction. And because the IRS is interlinked with the Treasury, it was simple for them to do that. They recognized it, and it was easy to do. But as far as trying to use it to pay your bills, it got really more increasingly difficult.
Okay, we have a comment from one of the viewers that says A for V cannot be used anymore because of the bankruptcy of the United States Corp. Slim, Frank, thanks for that comment. Either one of you want to comment on that?
Well, I knew it was an old system of doing things. I was just curious what Martin's thoughts were on it.
Okay. Does
Yeah,
the
that was a way
bankruptcy?
that people were manipulating the IRS to be able to pay their bills using their bonds or money bonds in their treasury,
Right.
trying to attach to their accounts, checks and things, sending that into the IRS, have the IRS pay their bills. That's what A4V was back in the day. So yeah, they've changed how they do things a lot. They've made it far more difficult on people to do that. The IRS doesn't accept certain methods of uh, issuing an A4V. They've made it so complicated people don't even try anymore to do it. So
Okay, we have another comment. Free range, Gale of Gaia, welcome. Thanks for joining us. She says, how do we compete with those who can look ahead and make these adjustments? For every move you make, they can easily counter it. The playing field is not level, but needs to be. Is there another timeline, Audrey? Or how,
well,
if
I
the
do have an
dark
answer.
has, I know, but if the dark has if they have the same device that the light side has, what do you do? So, okay, what's your answer to that?
So first and foremost, to answer that question, because they look at what is coming up ahead, it changes it anyway because they've seen it, they've viewed it.
Of course.
So it's not concrete. The future is never concrete. And that is because where we stand right now in our frequency, the variables are still set. They do change, they evolve. The values of these variables, these fixed variables in this timeline,
Right.
they shuffle and change throughout time. That's normal. They change in patterns. And the patterns can be predicted, but nothing is concrete. So if you want to make a change, if let's say they know you're going to go to the bank the next day, and you have a premonition that something bad is going to happen at that bank, you just choose not to go there that day. And they were expecting to do something, you just change the timeline by making a different decision. So the power is within your power to change ahead of time what they're going to do and what they're going to be able to do to you, as long as you're able to see and calculate
Right.
what the
So,
risks are of any decision
right.
that you make. It's
So,
always about careful planning.
so
Go ahead.
you're saying free will. Look, it's just kind of like, I mean, what you're talking about is like essentially like a tarot card reading. The way the energies are aligned at a certain point in time, this is what, this is, and you take out your tarot cards. I hate to use this example, but it almost seems like Looking Glass is a very sophisticated form of tarot reading because it expresses the energy at that point, that particular point in time. But free will choice change, can and often changes that. So
Exactly.
what the
So
advantage the
let's
dark has to have is that they have to know what the light plays are going to be. This is a 5D or maybe above level game of chess that's going on globally right now. Wouldn't you agree, Audrey?
absolutely. Now, I wanted to add to that when they look, let's say, into the future with Looking Glass, the variables are only set for that moment in time that they are looking into the future. They change. They do change as time progresses. Now, once you reach that time, there might be similarities to what they have seen, but it won't be exact. And that is because the variables are always shuffling no matter what. So they can't accurately predict exactly what's going to happen, let's say in 2025 on March 15th at 3:19 p.m. and 20 seconds, because it's going to change.
So it's a game of probabilities is what it
It's
is.
probabilities, and they calculate odds. It's all about odds. So
Right.
it's about what are the odds that this is going to happen in this timeline based on what's happening in these other timelines too. So they're trying to calculate. Now, just because they looked ahead, they changed it anyway. So they got a glimpse of what is to be if the variables had remained the same before they looked at it. If the variables had not changed from that point to the point in the future to which they are looking at, then yes, the outcome would be what they saw. But that is never the case. Things change, it evolves. And then you have variables like CERN and other devices that they're firing off that cause the Mandela effect. And I've explained how that happens with CERN. So it causes variables to trade places too. So their predictions aren't always accurate. So you do
Yeah.
have a chance, is my point.
Right.
You do have a chance. Everyone in this world has a
Mhm.
chance to outsmart them. You just have to calculate and you have to prepare.
And so one of the things that's really brilliant that I think the whole Q, whoever's behind Q is, it's really Sun Tzu. It's really this perfected, they're such incredible genius strategists because they always let the enemy think they're in control. That's why they're doing this charade, on the stage of Congress. They think they're in control. And that's their biggest downfall. What Trump is doing is he's allowing them to expend all of their resources, use all of their ammunition, and then, until they have nothing left. And that's essentially where we're at. Because now we're going to see, when they lose their power, they lose whatever they have to try to retain and hold on to power and control. That's when, Trump will act. But they're doing it. See, I call this Impalo, and I've talked about this before. This is like a Shakespearean tragic comedy that's playing out right now. Impalo, the story of how the Democrats fell on their own sword. And they're impaling themselves, or actually doing it to themselves. They set traps. Q, the whole team behind Q, set trap after trap after trap for the dark. And they're so desperate at this time. They're taking huge risks. And every time they fall for the bait, they step in the trap and they get snagged. And that's really what the state that we're at right now. And how wonderful is this that it was. Look, I've been doing GoldFish Report 4.5 years. Martin's been on before. Martin, you came on very early on as well. So did Audrey Ewis. This is not your first time on GoldFish Report. And we've been trying to wake people up for a long, long time. And that was the beginning. That was the seed that started a lot of this. But once Q came on, boy, did this, it spread like wildfire, globally. And, but still, there's so many people who are still, happily sleepwalking. But this is going to change. I mean, people are following Q. They realize that this is about to change. And you see more people from someone from the Pentagon just resigned yesterday as well. And so don't say nothing's happening. It's just like, it's not going to be, it's not going to be on the headlines because MSM is part of the deep state. So they're not going to make a big deal about it. They just, keep beating the dead horse, so to speak. I really hate using that example, but because I love horses and I hate that visual when I say it, but figuratively, they keep pounding the war drum, and people are so tired. Their ratings are horrible. They're going downhill, and CNN is I don't even know. Does anybody even watch it anymore? I don't think they're so fake, such fake news.
I don't even bother to watch the news anymore. I don't need to.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to add really brief was
Sure.
that Looking Glass, there are so many quadrillions of variables for them to monitor. The people alone are 8 billion people. Each individual is their own variable too. There are 8 billion variables right there that they can't monitor all at once. Looking Glass is not a perfect system. They believe it's perfect. They believe that they have an upper hand in the game, but Looking Glass lets them see, through a thin coffee straw, through a very thin coffee straw, what's going to happen just for a specific point in time, and then that changes ahead of the game. People don't realize that they have power. There are 8 billion people here. 8 billion people now. We have just a small, tiny pinprick of that listening to us now. But what I will say is that all of you have the power to make change. Every single one of you has power to take control of your lives. As Martin's been explaining, there are so many ways to regain control of the slave system, to make it work for you. And then, as I was explaining, there are ways to break away from it too, if you so chose. But either way, neither answer is wrong. There are no bad answers here. Everybody has a great answer, and I'm really impressed with where this broadcast has gone. So everybody in this world has a chance to make a change because they are a variable in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has weight. Everyone has weight in this world. So
You know,
if you find that you're in a bad situation, you always have a chance to change your stars. You know, rather than thinking like, let's say, a $2 person, you can think like a $10 person and manifest that. You know, manifestation is powerful with intention. When you put that intention out into the universe, it responds. Now you have to be specific. You have to know what you want. And the universe will give. It always provides. The universe gives back to the people. The creator gives back to the people.
Audrey, wouldn't you agree though that the biggest, most, single most factor is the unpredictability of these 8 billion variables? That even one person, something major like Julian Assange, could be a factor that throws off and skews the entire, like before Julian Assange released this Vault 7, before he released, these files, and there's even files he hasn't released yet. He's one person. Now he had other people helping him, but he's one person who was one variable in this whole equation that threw their timeline off so severely, so incredibly. So one person,
One
when you see
person
what one
can.
person, yeah. And
Everyone.
Martin came on here today, and this was the unpredictable nature. The unpredictability is what they cannot predict. They go by, like you said, probabilities. But human beings by nature are unpredictable. And so Martin's here talking. Pardon?
I said absolutely. And everyone, as I said, has a chance to make a difference, has a chance to make a change. Everybody can stand up and be their own voice. Imagine 8 billion voices standing up. What would the cabal do?
That would resonate throughout the entire galaxy, I think, the whole solar system. But Martin, you're saying that people, this is the opportunity, this is your message today, is that, but can you also explain, so we could go to the Supreme Court and have the court look into this and investigate this, but where does that power come from? Where to do that? Where does that come from that we have? If someone wants to write a letter and say, based on the Bill of Rights, is this where it comes from, Martin?
No,
I'm writing
no,
to the Supreme Court. Can you
no,
explain to the
no,
viewers where we
no.
get
Let's
that
take it.
power to do that?
Take it back. Take it back to your local communities. Take it back to the people around you. Create a petition. The petition states that you want the Supreme Court to form an injunction stopping all Congress until all congressmen are investigated, stopping all actions until all congressmen are investigated and held accountable to their constituents. Right. If they're not representing their constituents, then they're in breach of fiduciary duty to their constituents. You collect all these petitions, and what's more powerful than social media? The wet ink signature on a petition entered together collectively, all of us collectively sitting down outside a Safeway store, collecting petition signatures, having a notary handy to authenticate those signatures so that they don't have to look for your address. You don't have to look for your phone number. You don't have to look up your email address to verify who you are. You have a notary sitting right next to you, and that notary will verify that signature on that petition. You collect all those petitions from all those different precincts, all those different people out here from all over the United States, and then one party takes all those petitions to an exclusive equity. You use equity acts in personam. And that way, when you go, you have to hand that to them directly. And why is that? Because if it can easily be presumed and assumed to be abandoned property if you let go of that petition. So we create petitions based on the fact we want Congress investigated into, we want an injunction stopping everything, and we want all of this done before Congress resumes any action at all, period. We create, that's why I'm saying you can get on the internet, you can find how to write a petition. And you can talk to your neighbors and say, what would you like to see Congress do? Put that in these petitions. Put what you, because this is the way the Republic was supposed to work. They had these things called the jural assemblies, where people got together and they said, hey, we'd like this to change and this to change and this to change. And they would set the agendas. Then they would elect somebody within that assembly to take that notice to someone who can do some change, who could make the change. But what's happening now is you got all these politicians coming out and they're saying, hey, here's my agenda. You like it? Vote for me. Instead of us saying, no, this is what we want done, we're electing you to go make sure it gets done. So it's backwards.
It's really important that we have this conversation. It's important to be having this conversation at this point in time, because someone made a comment in here, the police policing the police. Exactly. Whose oversight? Who is the oversight? And the oversight, and I know Martin's answer to this, it's us. Ultimately, when all these other checks and balances of government fail, it's we the people who are responsible for that oversight. Isn't that right?
Yes. We are the ones who have to hold our representatives accountable. But we have to first set the agenda. We keep letting everybody else do the work for us. We keep being enabled by something else. Oh, I don't want to do that. That takes too much time. I don't want. No, I don't want to get involved. Those are the people who like to be governed. Fine, let them be governed. I don't want to be governed. I want to be self-governing and self-reliant. I want to be the one who sets the agenda, not is subject to the agenda.
In our last 10 minutes here, I want to, also bring Audrey back and see if he wants to, if in the last 10 minutes we have any questions. I know we talked about a lot of things. Martin, if you had closing comments or anything else you wanted to say to our viewers. Audrey, go ahead.
I actually had another question for Martin. What are your thoughts on Michael Tellinger and Ubuntu in South Africa?
Love it. Love it. I love everything about what he's doing. I love it because he's getting small groups of people together, becoming self-sufficient communities and building its own government. Think about the Indians. The Indians had their own little council house that they were governing their. You think about this. How many indigenous tribes are left on this planet? Almost none. Almost all of them are gone. Why? Because a system needs participants, but a self-governing body doesn't need a system.
I wanted to also add, up at Standing Rock, we had a movement back in 2016 that we called it the No DAPL movement, the Dakota Access Pipeline. When they were trying to put that Dakota Access Pipeline through the Missouri River, we were fighting that for I was up there for 9.5 months. I stayed there an extra couple of months beyond the actual camps when everything fell apart. I stayed up to help the tribes. But one thing I wanted to bring up was that in the camps, we had a system of Ubuntu. We had barter and trade. We gave and traded as we needed. We lived within our means. Everything was always done without money. Now, although a lot of money flowed through those camps, for things that were bought and, donations and this and that, me and Dan, Apache Dan, Dan McBolin, we never took a single dime from the tribe. We worked with what we had and we helped them within our resources, and we had supporters that were helping us. But the system that we had there was Ubuntu, and it was magical. It was truly magical. The things that we were doing with that was phenomenal. This is where I met many, many, many tribal members from the Humpapa Lakota Sioux tribe, the Oglala tribes, Pine Ridge, and Cheyenne River, and we had tribes from all over the country that came in, from Navajo to Hopi to Comanche. I mean, we had people swarming in from all over the United States and around the world and contributed to this Ubuntu system. And I couldn't help but to think about Michael Tellinger when I was there at the camps. It was a magical experience. The community was amazing. The people were amazing. We did so much up there to make a difference. But what we really did was show the world that we can create an Ubuntu system anywhere. It's possible for us to go back to barter and trade and still exist and survive without compromising our ability to have the necessities we need in life to exist and to live.
Well,
So
this is what this is what I mentioned earlier about this article regarding Iran, Malaysia, Turkey, and Qatar, regarding, using gold and barter to trade again. So it looks like we've, gone through the abuses of this Federal Reserve, fractional reserve, banking, debt slavery system, and we're going back to basics now. We're going back to a gold standard. We're going back to communities like you're talking about that are using bartering, and I think probably within the indigenous communities, it's always been that way. I don't think it much changed, other than they're forced to conform and adapt when they need to. But what impresses me is, despite all of the challenges and persecution and genocide that indigenous communities, have suffered, their values, and they have suffered greatly. Their values are, is still part of very much their identity, and still keep them united in terms of their identity. And as you said, Audrey, it showed. I mean, it was very obvious when uh, i- at Standing Rock, how all over the world, and we talked about this in our last broadcast, how there were indigenous cultures from all over the world who couldn't get to Standing Rock, but they got their message out. They took photos of water is life. They took photos in Mongolia, in South America, in Australia, all over the world, and they were posting them on social media. But this was such a fundamental issue, and you have the court, the CEO of Nestle Corporation saying that water is not a human right. And I'll tell you something, folks, we have to realize not everybody. I think Benjamin Fulford said it. There is an anti-life force on this planet. There's a force that wants to extinguish human life on this planet, and we're not going to let that happen. Um, I think that if you're going to allow Nestle to go and siphon the water, the God-given natural water out of our lakes and streams and rivers, to bottle and sell back to us, folks, we have a problem. And you know what? It's everybody's responsibility. It really is. And you're saying, yes, some people don't want to be governed. Well, guess what? You're going to have nothing. I mean, everybody has to. I think the message that we have to, in the last 5 minutes, we have the message we really have to convey. And I hope that we've tried to inspire this in our viewers, is that everybody has to do their part, whatever that is. It could be small, it could be big. Isn't that right, Audrey? Everybody can do something, even if it means sharing this URL. That means on an energetic level, you kept the information going. You did something. There was an exchange, and you somehow participated, even if it was, just sharing this link. Isn't that right?
no matter how much they do or how little they do, every single little tiny thing they do matters. Everything they do helps us to further change the world and make this a slightly better place for everybody, just one step at a time.
Yeah, and
So
like Martin said, oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Like Martin said, get a petition. I mean, even if you can't share the link, you can, put your signature on a petition, and that you can do. You probably know people in your local church and local community. A lot of people think they're completely powerless, and they're really not. They just maybe don't have the creativity on how they can be useful, how they can participate in the system. But ask what you can do for your country. And that's what President Kennedy warned us about: the secret societies, warned us about the shadow government, warned us about how they operated in that speech. And he also told us the remedy. He said, ask what you can do for your country. So this is the time. He sacrificed his life. He tried to fix this. He tried to get rid of the Federal Reserve. He tried to do a lot of things that President Trump is now trying to do, and they're trying to do the same thing to President Trump. So the whole message here is, what can you do? And the idea is that you can do a lot more than you think, even if it's just to start a petition. As Martin said, create a petition, for an injunction to request an injunction of all activities, stop all action until all of Congress is held accountable to their constituents, not to Israel, but to their constituents, not to big pharma, not to big corporations, but to their constituents. Because I don't know how else we could say it. We've been saying it for 2 hours. A lot of other channels say the same thing as well. A lot of it's getting out there, but everybody can do something. So in this last minute or two, I want to thank everybody for viewing. I want to thank all of our lovely guests who joined us in our chat today. I want to thank Ascension Radio for being here. And of course, you know, we are going to launch Ascension Radio into the stars, folks. Stay with us, stay tuned, follow us. We're going to do a lot more live streams with Ascension Radio. We're going to do more reports with Martin, who's going to have, and I have to tell you, Martin, you're doing a great job for being a new grandfather. His daughter just gave birth, and we are, congratulating you and your family on that. And I know you must be very tired, and we will have you back, Martin, and you can talk more in detail about these concepts of equity and what does that really mean. And let me just ask Martin if you have any final comments or anything that you'd like to share with our viewers before we wrap this up.
Two things real fast. Do you know how much influence the Indians had on our Constitution and on our Declaration of Independence? Our republic is based on a lot of their technology they had in their little tribes that they were creating their government form. Two, when you're creating your petition, write it as a constituent. What do you want done by your congressman? Write these in your petitions. What is it as a constituent? What is it you want these people to do? This is how you hold them accountable, getting signatures of people in your area and putting together what it is that you want to see happen in your area. That's what a petition is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Petition is to plead, Harry. Harry, and by the way, it was a good question, but we're out of time now, so we'll have to wait until our next broadcast. So, Martin, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you back and talking about these topics, and we do hope you'll come back and talk to us more about this.
Yes, I want to move this forward.
Absolutely. Audrey, did you have anything you wanted to mention before we sign off? Because we're at that time.
I just wanted to thank you for having me, and it's been an honor, Martin, to talk to you on the radio here. This is the first time that I think you and I have been on a broadcast together, and it's been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank everybody for joining us here on GoldFish Report and Ascension Radio, and do take a look at our archives. You can find links to Louisa's archives on our page. You can also find links directly to the channel. If you're listening from Ascension Radio, you can find links directly to her YouTube channel directly on our page at radio.mpact.org. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you all. And this concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report. Thanks for viewing.